Greetings and salutations, Internet Descendants. It is I, Wolfphototech, and here we are with another delightful video. This time going with Star Trek Adventures. Fun fact, my last name is Shatner, or Shatner. It's one of the two variants of the last name. The Shatners that went to Canada shortened their name, and the Shatners that went around the world and went everywhere else didn't. So there you go. I grew up as a fairly big Star Trek fan, watching the original Star Trek, as well as Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and even Enterprise, as well as Voyager. I haven't watched much modern Star Trek because I don't subscribe to subscription services for streaming. However, I have considered it numerous times to actually buy the DVDs. I just haven't gotten around to it. I am very familiar with the Star Trek lore. My mom was a very big Star Trek fan as well. Various people might even subscribe to this channel who know my mom, might even concur with that. So here we go. This is... it's printed in Lithuania, which is very nice of them to spread printing around the world. Have it printed in Lithuania. It is the variation of the Modiphius 2D20 system, which is basically a dice pool system with... It's a D20 system with a slight dice pool mechanic to it. It should really be called 2D20 plus or 2 plus D20, because at minimum you roll 2D20s, but you can roll more 2D20s depending on the variant of system. Let's get going on this. There is no MSRP on this book. However, I remember it to be roughly around, say, $50. As I do absolutely love that the fact that they contain an actual map of the Alpha Quadrant right down here, and the Beta Quadrant. Right around here happens to be the Federation, and over here, if I remember correctly, is Klingons and Romulans and Vulcans and everyone else. Right off the bat, the credits and content section, table of contents is very well cleanly made out. I do love the Star Trek Next Generation motif, or onward, throughout the book. However, this is where it becomes very overly clear that there is some issue that is occurring with this system that's going to come in very quickly. First and foremost, you got Chapter 1, which is the introduction. Chapter 2 is the United Federation of Planets. Chapter 3 is your continuing mission. Chapter 4 is operations. Chapter 5 is reporting for duty. Chapter 6 is the final frontier. Chapter 7 is conflict. Chapter 8 is technology and equipment. Chapter 9 is home in the stars. Chapter 10 is game mastering. Chapter 11 is aliens and adversaries. And Chapter 12 is rescue at Exernus. Ugh. This is a nice little piece of artwork of the Voyager class starship, as well as the introduction. When you come to the beginning of the chapter, you'll typically have a page right here with the standard Starfleet motif and a few other things, as well as a starship or some piece of artwork from Star Trek lore there. The introduction basically walks you through what is a TTRPG system, as well as Star Trek. What is Star Trek? And so forth. It walks you through the basics of playing characters, the game master, dice, and so forth. And we continue on here, as well as basic training information. And it clearly outlines, it has a replay right here, a replay or example of play right here, which is always nice to have in a book. It's the obligatory, you don't know what a TTRPG system is? And I personally believe in the case of a IP like Star Wars, Star Trek, Dune, Blade Runner, having a so this is what a TTRPG is kind of section is actually a good thing to have in a book. I know some OSR people and various other people who scoff at that kind of thing. However, when it comes to a IP that is not inherently a TTRPG or a role-playing game, but a movie, book series, TV show, etc., comic book thing, having a chapter that covers what is a TTRPG is a really good thing to have, okay? I'm going to annoy some OSR people by saying that, but it is a good thing to say that. I will disagree with people when there is a legitimate reason to disagree with them, and I'll agree with people when they have a legitimate reason to be agreed with. Okay, now on to chapter 2, and this is one of those little fudgy points. This chapter explains what Star Trek is. In a very simple overall terms, they give you a map of where all the major events of Star Trek occur. This is kind of just a thing that I don't really care for, particularly in franchise or IP systems. This is like the flip side to the what is a TTRPG thing is like, in this case, the reason why you're getting into Star Trek Adventures is because you love Star Trek and you are fascinated by it, and you find out that there's a thing called a TTRPG or something. So, okay, I want to play Star Trek Adventures, and I actually do want to play Star Trek Adventures. However, explaining Star Trek in very simple terms to someone who has spent many years of their life studying Star Trek or watching a ton of TV shows and movies, it is fascinating at some extent. But if you read any of the Star Trek history books or Database Alpha or Beta, or brain fart, Memory Alpha and Memory Beta, you will know this stuff already, and this is the super smoothed over version that is not super fascinating because you've already read this probably like 20 or 30 times in other places. So it's sort of just, if you have to have the urge to read, or your completion is to read through the entire book, this is a section that is, you already know Star Trek. This is why you bought this, and you end up reading through it only to read things you've already read before 20 or 30, 40, 50 times. You watched it on TV and in the movies. It's fascinating. You might learn something new, but in this case, you don't really learn something new. This is one of those weird cases where it's a waste of a chapter. This kind of chapter in, say, like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder 2nd Edition or Starfinder or even Call of Cthulhu is actually a very good idea to have, because that actually teaches you, hey, what is the lore of this? What's the default lore of this setting, and what's the atmosphere like? If you watch Star Trek or watch the movies, you pretty much know what Star Trek is. Same thing with Star Wars. Same thing with Dune, Blade Runner, many other things based on IPs. You know what it means. So this is not the most interesting part of the book. And as a completionist, I feel obligated when I really want to get to the point of actually running the system. I feel like I need to read this just in case there's something important in here, but yet reading through the beginning part of it is kind of boring because I've already read that before in other places, and it's just not terribly appetizing. By the way, there is a variant of this system, another book, that is a campaign setting in the classic original Star Trek, and then there's also one for Deep Space Nine as well, and there's also a Klingon one as well. So I would really like to get Romulans as a campaign in setting book. because my brother is a really big fan of Romulans, so that'd be nice. So, anyways, you get all the very basics of Star Trek, you know, and I've seen this before. Hey, it's Captain Kirk. I always enjoy seeing Captain Kirk in classic Star Trek, like, in here, and ranks and everything else. And this is a situation where it just goes and it goes, and you don't really want it to be as long as it is because you've already read that stuff before. If you're buying Star Trek Adventures, you know what Star Trek is. So that whole chapter right there is way longer than it should be. I'm not joking. Now you have the continuing the mission. Now this is like the second problem with this book, is that the names of the chapters, the vast majority of them, are somewhat vague, and you kind of have to think about it to have it occur to you what it means. And same thing even with the sub-chapters in the book itself. Like Starfleet's purpose, the Prime Directive, Starfleet Academy, assignment, duties, and away teams. This is actually the first chapter that actually sets you up for knowing the basics of playing in a actual adventure of Star Trek Adventures. However, it is written as if it's also like an extension of the previous chapter, as if you are still reading history of Star Trek, which immediately kind of just ruins it. So there you go. However, once you get reading into it, it actually occurs to you that it actually is the introduction to the actual system, not just more lore of Star Trek. And they've got a nice double page. It actually is a nice blend of Next Generation vibe as well as the original Star Trek vibe. Because original Star Trek had a lot of scenes very much in this vibe of a ruined civilization. You arriving and seeing a ruined civilization or some bizarre otherworldly thing. Where Star Trek Next Generation kind of blended that and a latter variant of Star Trek. It kind of was a bridge between two worlds of Star Trek. So there you go. Then you have Operations, which basically explains how to actually roll dice for the system and all the other stuff like that. The actual mechanics, scenes, traits, and so forth. And this actually covers it all. I do like the fact that it is a black on white text on black background for the most part. However, I would say the text should be larger, and they should be more clear and obvious as to what each thing is. There is numerous scenes of very beautiful artwork of various vistas and locations in which you can travel with your crew. And so forth. And as I said before, this is actually a chapter that actually covers how to play the game and how to work on stuff. Advanced training, also character creation, stuff like that as well. It's not the most obvious thing. This is actually one of those situations where they don't have a piece of artwork over here for our next chapter, Chapter 5, Reporting for Duty, a career in Starfleet, life path creation in play, supporting characters, talents, and character development. This is the actual character creation chapter. The previous chapter was referencing components of character creation and the mechanics of how to play. This chapter is actually all about character creation in itself. Yet again, it's written somewhat in the style of actually being in the universe of Star Trek, which is a very common trend in TTRPGs now. And probably the reason for that is because the real reason for why they would write a book like that is that it's stronger as a copyright to write it as if it's in-world fiction, even mixing it up here and there. Because if someone were to, say, create references to the rules, third-party references, you could the company could more easily sue the third-party writer of that system, so of that third-party reference. So there you go. You got here the various species of Star Trek, or races, because they can crossbreed, which technically would make them a race situation. You got humans. You got a very angry human at helm. You got Trill, Vulcans, and so forth. Culture or monoculture, internal memo, and so forth. And they just continue walking you through. I'm going to flip a few pages. It covers age and other traits and various abilities of various species. Right after the character creation section, this is interesting. They actually put a character sheet right after character creation. And it's an example of a character. Joel Ethan, Trill, isolated colony, science officer, Trill Ethan symbiote, lieutenant commander, agricultural rural upbringing. And then he goes over the attributes. There's a total of 6 attributes, primary, and then disciplines, 6. You got values, talents, weapons, focuses, stress, injuries, and other equipment. And it continues on from there. Chapter 5.3. Skip a few pages. Got a batlith right there. Interesting that they got a batlith right there. There's a section on reputation and stuff like that. You got the Final Frontier chapter, which is chapter 6. Strange New Worlds, Alien Encounters, Stellar Phenomena, and Scientific Discoveries and Developments. Classic Star Trek here. A tricorder, a communicator, and a phaser type 2. This basically actually goes over or a bit more into playing in the various environments, adventuring, and different classifications of planets and stars, and what kind of situations you might get yourself into when you're out adventuring. This is sort of the transitory section between the Game Master and the player sections, as it covers concepts that the Game Master would be very interested in, but also at the same time, it's also a section that also covers a lot of stuff that the players should know. Right here, Chapter 7 is Conflict, which is actually your combat chapter about how to do social conflicts, how to deal with that, how to do phaser battles, how to do hand-to-hand combat, and much, much more. And then there's also spaceship combat as well. Personal log. How to work out momentum and speed. There's awesome. That is actually an alien species I'm not familiar with. If someone knows that alien species right there, please leave it in the comments. You got a Defiant class ship. Chapter 8 is Technology. This is basically your equipment section. It talks about what kind of technologies you might come across, what technologies you'll have on your person, basic starship technologies, and more, materials, and etc. You got, I believe that's Jupiter Station, if I remember correctly, as well as Enterprise D and Voyager. You got weapons and technology section, such as the various phasers. Phaser 1, Phaser 2, and a Phaser Type 3. Phaser Type 1 is actually rather compact and easily hidden. That's kind of neat. A hypo spray, pattern enhancers, and so forth. Information on starships, star bases, colonies, the starship rules for the system, and much, much more. We've got a Bajoran and a human, obviously. Reporting to Romulan High Command. And so forth. And then in a few pages, there will also be a section on game mastering, as I said before. The whole back 2/3 of the book is actually rather well organized. It's just they sometimes use bad names for the chapters and sub-chapters that require you to actually stop and think to how that would work in Star Trek and terminology. Various starships, as well as alien vessels. Borg Cube, Dominion Fighter, Ferengi ship. Got a nice mixer. And then you have the section on game mastering, which is all information on how to manage the rules and how to use everything else. I'm actually going to end non-player characters and so forth. And you happen to have a chapter in the set back here that actually has various opponents that your parties can run up against, like Romulans, Borg, and so forth. Some Klingons. Just paging back and forth through it with common stats. Ferengi, Cardassians, and so forth. And then I'm going to put this down and skip all the way to the back. Oh, they also have, as I said before, they also have various species of alien creatures that you can run into in Star Trek as well, both in space and on ground. And then they have a little bonus adventure in the back. I will literally not show you that. Alrighty. This is the character sheet right here. It is a single sheet for your character. You don't need any more sheets than this. And then on the back side of that sheet happens to be the sheet for the starship your character is on. So it's a single sheet yet again. So that's actually kind of handy that they have condensed it down. They also have the Star Trek Adventures Borg Cube collectible. By the way, this sucker sells for $500 now. It's really hard to come by. And then you have an index, which links to all the important terminology and concepts that's within the system. And it also has advertisements for their Modiphius' other systems, such as Conan, Mutant Year Zero, and John Carter of Mars, Vampire, and more. So there you go. As well as another map of the Klingon Empire and the Romulan Star Empire. And the Shackleton Expanse. So there you go. Personally, this book is probably like around a 3.25. It starts at a 3.25. You have like 3 chapters in it that one of them covers stuff that would be very much in line with things that people would know if they are fans of Star Trek and would be interested in playing the system. So if you are interested in playing the system, you would know a lot of that stuff already. So it feels like, why are we treading over this again? And then you have that third chapter, which is kind of weirdly gray zone, where it's like setting you up for playing in the system, but yet it's still very heavily in universe setup. And then from there, the chapters straighten out and become more easily discerned as it moves along. It's as if someone started writing this book, or a bunch of people started writing this book, and they started with a really strong emphasis on making it in universe, or a documentation of Star Trek as a concept, and it takes you a while to get anywhere where it actually gets into the actual game system itself. And then as they were writing those first few chapters, it starts to occur to them that they should make it less in-universe, maintain some of that feel, but make it easier to read and digest. And they eventually end out at the very back third of the book, where it's like, okay, this all makes sense. The first third is basically entirely in-universe, has a history book kind of vibe to it, as well as some in-universe feel to it that requires a little too much time and effort trying to find stuff. And it forces you to literally go to the very back index of the book to actually look for the term that you're looking for to actually get where you want to go, because it having the titles of chapters and sub-chapters be like terms and phrases is from the TV shows, or metaphorical in nature, results in people having to stop and think. And you don't want to have people stopping and thinking about, like, wait a minute, where is this feature in the book, when I'm trying to figure it out in the middle of a game, or trying to study up, trying to learn how to play the game in a hurry. And that's not good. So it starts out at a 3.25 and it creeps up to a 3.5. It's a 2d20 system. Side note, the dice are custom dice for the system, which is a terrible thing. I'm not joking. It's absolutely a terrible thing. Modiphius and Cubicle 7 have a terrible habit of using custom dice with custom symbols, and this results in you buying more dice that are only good with that system. So that's an immediate downgrade for this TTRPG. So if you don't like custom dice systems, but you like Star Trek, you're going to have to sit on that thought very carefully and say, do I want to homebrew a variant of Star Trek for a system I already have? And I'd probably suggest, say, like Starfinder First Edition, or Traveler, the Modiphius, the Mongoose Traveler, not Modiphius. I'm holding Modiphius Star Trek Adventures. Mongoose Traveler, which is also a really good option for homebrewing Star Trek. Those are really good options right there, replacement options, particularly the Traveler, or the Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition, or Far Future Enterprises Traveler 5th Edition. If you are not bothered by custom dice, and you will just buy the custom dice, then in that case you can go ahead and try this out and enjoy it. It's on my list of things I want to do, but every time I think about the custom dice thing, that just makes it an extra hurdle to get people into. And with a lot of TTRPG players today, a lot of the newer players, which I do deal with a bit, they're particularly hard to get into new systems because they're new and they're just getting like into 5th edition Pathfinder Call of Cthulhu. And then you throw in custom dice and it just drags everything out even more. So I would place this around 3.25. If Modiphius continued with that heavy history of Star Trek thing through this entire book, or the in-world, they kept the in-world heavy feel of the earlier chapters through the entire book, this would actually have crept down to 2.75 stars. Because if you do too much of that, it just makes it harder to learn the system. So there you go. I hope you have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful weekend, a magnificent month. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, comment, and share, and put it into a playlist. And have, yet again, a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful weekend, a magnificent month. Ciao.